In this candid interview, we will get the opportunity to hear some author-on-author discussion about systems thinking and what it can mean for you. Our interviewer, Mr. Rick Lochner, comes to us with a varied perspective from the private and public sectors. Mr. Lochner started RPC Leadership Associates, Inc. after 30 years of management and executive leadership experience in a variety of service industries. As a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, Rick successfully led his organizations and teams in environments as extreme as the interior of Alaska to the front lines of Cold War Germany. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, he traded his Army uniform for the private sector, and for the next 18 years held progressively more responsible leadership positions, ranging from the frontline management to senior executive management. He has led organizations in Fortune 100 corporations and privately held entrepreneurial ventures in multiple industries, both for-profit and nonprofit. Rick is a visiting professor at Keller Graduate School of Management at DeVry University, where he teaches leadership, organizational behavior, managerial communications, and managing conflict in the workplace. He gives back to the community as the president for Literacy DuPage, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting adult literacy within DuPage County, Illinois, and sits on the board of the directors of the 5-star Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce. Rick is a contributing author to A Common Sense Approach to Sustainability by Tammy Cole, and author of The Missing Piece, Achieving Sustainable Success Through Business Alignment, both published in 2012. You are about to see a discussion involving two men with very different backgrounds and experiences. Now that you know a little bit about Mr. Lochner, we prepare for his conversation with Mr. Hamid Noorani, the author of Rational Decision Making and Power, the Modern Doctrine. Mr. Noorani is the founder and president of Powerful Methods, whose mission is to develop a new generation of leaders who serve the world by inspiring ordinary people to produce extraordinary results. You're about to hear about the latest developments in science and systems thinking. The topics include practical lessons and how to make them work for you, decision-making models and their implications, arriving at win-win solutions and what it takes, what you can learn from the learning process itself, and what do we really mean about power as it relates to Power, the Modern Doctrine, designing a better life and building enduring productive relationships and organizations.
Well, Hank, thanks for allowing me to be part of this process this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I'm sure you ask great questions.
So to get us started, let's take a look at the book. And, so what was the inspiration of the book? And I'm curious as to how you came by the title.
Well, the title is very significant, actually. I'm trying to give a message with that title. But the origins of the search started when I first left my home country, Iran, to go to England to study. It was the first time I left home. It was the first time I left the country. It was the first time I went to England. That is totally different from Iran. Even crossing the road is different. You think cars are coming this way. And they come the opposite direction. But there I learned not just a new culture as it was in England, but at the same time I was exposed to people of multiple cultures. Students coming from around the world, Americans, Chinese, Africans, Malaysians, everybody was there. And the origin was that I realized that all these different cultures have different perspectives, and there is no way to bridge it. And this is the reason for much of the conflict in the world, because people cannot bridge their different perspectives. So for me, it was a teenage fantasy that what if somebody could come up with a mathematical formula that come up with a philosophy that is all just like mathematics. You start from first principles and then deductively develop all the theorems and all the principles that follow. It was a fantasy, but it got me into asking questions for which I was not ready to ask. And by the time I was 18 years old, I had already crisis of faith, I had crisis of identity. And by the time I was 19 years old, I knew that I knew nothing. And this is not a good position to be. Knowing that you know nothing is terrible. But it set me off on a journey of discovery, and eventually I figured out about systems thinking that this is it. This can bridge all these cultural divides, all these philosophic divides. But at the same time, I realized that human knowledge, all human knowledge, is really all about power. When I arrived at this conclusion, I was not ready for it. Even though I was a mature adult, something inside me cried out, no, it can't be. Human knowledge all cannot be about power. So what I did was a couple of weekends, I excused myself from the family. I left home early on Saturday morning, had breakfast somewhere out, and went to a park, one of the Hennepin parks in Minneapolis. And I debated with myself. I challenged myself. Can you think of an idea that does not relate to power? And everything that is noble, everything that we value, we do so precisely because it empowers us, either us or empower someone else. We, for example, we value Mother Teresa's work as very noble. It's hard to imagine that Mother Teresa was looking for power in terms of domination, but the reason we value her work is because she empowered all the poor people, and she gave them more options, more opportunities.
Exactly.
So power in the sense of capacity to influence action is really the reason why we want knowledge. There is no other reason to want knowledge other than to influence action. So there is a complete shift in thinking, but the reason I call it modern doctrine, because now we are not looking at power in terms of domination of others or control of others. We are looking at power in terms of having expanded capacity to influence action. But that's a great question.
Okay.
I hope I answered it right.
No, that is great, and of course, you and I are both graduate level professors, and we when you really think about the idea of power, we forget that sometimes empowerment,
That's right.
is all inclusive, includes power in itself. I know that we both aspire to make sure that students leave our classrooms with a practical sense or a practical application of what we're teaching, of what we're bringing into the classroom. So talk through 2 or 3 practical ideas that a graduate student, somebody, whether they're in business or nonprofit or any industry, really not necessarily a specific industry, but what can they take out of this book that would help them be better business people?
Here you have decision horizons. And here are the type of decisions, each with its own length of horizon. Horizon means to what extent of time does this decision affect you? So right away you notice that we are not just making one kind of decisions, we are making a lot of other kind of decisions. We are very comfortable making operational decisions, what to have for lunch, what to wear this morning, or how to get to work, which route to take. These are all operational decisions. They are important, but their range of time that they impact our lives is very short. A higher order decision would be planning decisions. Yeah, we do these seldom, but they have a longer impact. And in fact, planning decisions direct operational decisions. Operational decisions are made in fulfillment of planning decisions. But planning decisions themselves are made in support of strategic decisions. And a strategy can affect an organization or an individual from 0 to 5 years and directs all the planning decisions and all the operational decisions, and so forth. And the longest horizon decision is actually philosophy. And few of us ever question the philosophy that we are following. Most people think that, I have no time for philosophy. Wait a minute. Every decision that you are making is shaped by the philosophy you are following. you have a philosophy. You either have it by design or by default. If you say you have no philosophy, it means you never thought about it. But you do have the philosophy, because without one, you couldn't make all the other decisions. So right away, the students can start thinking in terms of making higher order decisions, not just being stuck in making operational decisions. And they have to start thinking in terms of decision of the culture, organizational culture, decisions of mission, decisions of vision, decisions of strategy.
So what you're really saying is that using these 7 decision horizons, helping them become better leaders.
That's right.
for
What
their
do we want leaders
organizations.
to do? Do you want leaders to make only operational decisions? Well, there are foremen at the factory floor. He's a leader. He's making operational decisions. But what do you expect from CEO? Do you want CEO to make operational decisions, strategy decisions, vision, mission, culture? And how far do you want the CEO to go?
Okay,
So
makes sense.
for me, the organization, the CEO first job is to set the culture of the organization. Because once you set the culture, it really directs everything else.
So can you tie then some of the concepts from the book into, because most of the students are going to come in maybe up through strategy, but mostly planning and operations. They're going to have those skills. At least that's what I see. They come in with kind of that lower level as you described. So how does the book help them elevate their decision-making process?
Yeah, every one of these decisions has a definition that explains what it means. For example, what do we mean by philosophy? Philosophy basically says, this is what we believe. What do you believe? Right away, you're going to open up your mind and say, what is it I believe? And students are going to be faced with the same questions I had to face age 19. What is it I believe? I have no idea.
Do any of us know at that age?
That's right. What culture do we want? What would be a productive culture for an organization? What mission do we want to choose? First, we have to choose mission in our personal lives. We have to ask leaders, what is the mission you have in your life? And if you don't have a mission for your life, how do you know what you're doing is actually of any value? Because whatever you do without direction, you end up regretting later on.
So when we look at this, we're talking about a couple of things here. I'm hearing that the ideas in this book can help one with their own personal
That's right.
decisions,
That's
their own
right.
personal philosophies, their personal vision
That's
and
right.
mission.
Leadership starts with the self.
Absolutely. And then, but does that help them, almost by default, does that help them become better leaders in their organizations, whether they're strictly leading on personal power or positional power? Does that help them within their organizations?
Here you have the organizational hierarchy of objectives. Organizations exist to satisfy the owner. But in order to do that, they need wealth. They need commercial wealth and social wealth. And they create this wealth, either they produce it, or they trade for it, or they produce it collectively. So organizations need sovereignty, they need integrity, and integrity is made of love and learning. Individuals also have a hierarchy of objectives, and again, love falls right at the bottom. What it means is that if you love your organization, you cannot help but to lead. What I'm saying is very profound. I'm saying leadership is not a mountain, a peak that you have to climb and reach. I'm saying leadership is a whole. If you love your organization, if you love your people, that hole opens up and you cannot help but to be sucked into it.
Okay, so how do I get, most of us fall into a hole, we want to get out of it. So how does that turn around and create something that that I can walk out of the classroom and say, okay, I agree. So how does that help me tomorrow? How does that help me Monday?
It means that you need, because you are contributing to organizations, be it your family, be it your place where you work, or be it the city where you live, or the country you belong to. You need to be able to make rational decisions. Just having a winning attitude doesn't mean you know how to make rational decisions. In fact, people who say they have a winning attitude, they're actually telling you they have no idea how to define their objectives.
Good point.
Because if they knew how to define the objectives, they would say, well, these are the objectives, and this is how we're going to measure it by the metrics, and this is what we're going to do to achieve it. They wouldn't have a need for a winning attitude. The fact that they say they have a winning attitude means they have no idea where to begin to start defining the objectives. And this is what we're talking about leadership. What is it we want to accomplish? You want to lead people. What it means, this is an act of love. Leadership is an act of love. Leadership is an act of service. When you say you want to lead others, what you mean is that you want to guide them for their own good. You want to reach their interests. Leadership is not something you do to others. It is something you do for others. It's just like teaching. You and I, we teach, but we cannot push knowledge into a student's head when they are daydreaming. We have to entice them.
Absolutely.
Teaching is something you do for others. The way we teach is that we facilitate learning. And when we facilitate learning, they learn. And when they learn, then teaching has happened. Leadership is the same way. You guide others for their own interest. And when they pursue their interest, then leadership has happened.
I know in your book you talk about win-win, and that really caught my eye because win-win is a term we use a lot, you hear a lot, but I'm here to suggest that that is one of the more difficult things to achieve. So how does love and learning, especially, I think that's what you were keying in on, how does that help us in that win-win idea?
This is a business system. Here we have the business as a system. Investors invest into the business. The business decides what to produce. They buy factors of production from suppliers, produce products, make products, sell the products to customers. They get the revenue. They pay their costs, gross profit. Taxes go to the government. Net profit goes to the investors. And all these activities take place in the context of the community. Every one of these relationships is a win-win relationship.
Potentially to be a win.
Well, if it is not, the parties will not continue that relationship. If the relationship is continuing, is proving that each party to that transaction, by the virtue of the choices they had, they have decided that this transaction is their best available option.
How does that explain, I've not to single out any one company, but there are large companies who smaller companies do not like working with, but they're a large company.
That's covered in a strategy in terms of the Michael Porter's 5-force field, that sometime firm has got bargaining position relative to the supplier. Sometimes suppliers have greater bargaining position relative to the firm, and sometimes the firm has greater bargaining position relative to the customer, and sometimes the customer has relative bargaining position to the firm. And then Michael Porter suggests all the actions you can take in various combinations. And that's true. Free markets start with freedom. And freedom is choice. All the parties to these transactions have choice. So here you go and buy something from a seller. But the seller is selling you a product made by a producer. And notice every one of these actors have choice. Buyers have 5 generic choices. You can buy from firm A, you can buy from the competition, you can buy a different product, you can make the product yourself, or you can do nothing and save your money. You have choices. Sellers also have choice. They can sell to you, they can sell it to somebody else, they can sell a different product, they can consume the product themselves with a value, or they can sell the business and do something else. Producers also have choice. Producers can produce product A, they can produce a different product, they can invest in production capacity, they can leave the industry for another industry, or they can sell the business and retire. Every actor have choices. Once you have choices, you cannot claim that you were unfairly treated. Let me bring you back to the organization system, because this is very significant what we are discussing here. There's a lot of misconceptions about these principles. Some customers say, I bought something and I got ripped off. I said, why? He said, well, I saw it a day later, cheaper somewhere else. I said, wait a minute. You purchased the product at that given price. At the moment you made that decision, you saw value in that product. You saw value. The benefit was worth the cost you were paying for it. So the fact that you can see cheaper 2 days later doesn't alter that equation. The benefit is still greater than the cost. You could have got a better deal, but nobody ripped you off. You made a decision to go and purchase that product. So people need to take responsibility for their actions because they have choices. You don't like one option, there are other options. And this is what it means about learning. That free markets enforce learning. When you go and buy something, because you are the one paying the cost and you are the one receiving the benefit, then you have the economic incentive to make the rational choice where the benefit is greater than the cost. And if your choice happens not to be optimal, then you have the economic incentive to learn from that experience so that your next choice is a better one. So one of the magics of free market system is in this matching between contribution of resources to buy something or do something and the utilization of the benefit. Because you are paying contributing the resources to do this action or buy this product, and you are enjoying the utility of that product or that outcome, then you have the incentive to optimize utilization of resources.
It seems as though in that idea, the win-win idea is fleeting.
Well,
because 2 days ago I thought it was a win-win, but 2 days later when it was cheaper, it's a win-lose.
No, you didn't lose anything. How did it become a win-lose?
My assigned value drops.
Well, you have to look at the moment when you made the decision. What made you evaluate the product at the value you did? What made you evaluate the cost at the level you did? But it is nevertheless your decision. But the question you are raising about win-win or win-lose is very important. And I have prepared a number of diagrams here to share this concept with you. Because in Anglo-Saxon cultures, we see the world as a zero-sum game. In fact, we actually played as a constant sum game, but we call it zero-sum game. There are actually 4 possibilities. You can have zero-sum, constant sum, you can have positive sum, and you can have negative sum games in terms of game theory. But the idea of win-win actually is also explained by Anglo-Saxon writers. The first idea of win-win that I came across was from the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher, which I loved because I had this notion that it is possible for both parties to win, but I could not explain it, whereas he explained it very well. I'm explaining it in terms of this matrix of possibilities. If 2 people interact, there are only 4 possible outcomes. Either both win or both lose, or A loses, B wins, or A wins, B loses. There is no other possibility. This is what the matrix of possibility. But see what happens in the long run. The party that loses is not going to play a game, so both lose. So these 2 options actually end up with lose-lose. So in the long run, there are only 2 possible outcomes. Either both win or both lose. There is no other possibility in the long run. Notice this is completely the opposite to the matrix of possibilities in a competitive sport. Competitive sport is a game for entertainment. The rules are artificially set to prevent the possibilities of either both winning or both losing, so as to force somebody winning and somebody losing. Competitive sports do not replicate real life. Real life is either you both win or you both lose. There is no other possibility, because in the long run, any party who is losing has no incentive to continue with that relationships. Now, in Western cultures, we take this idea and we have built most of our institutions around this idea. For example, labor management relationship is win-lose. They go into a negotiating room and somebody wins, somebody loses, and everybody is happy because it is settled. Now, when labor wins, they actually lose. And it's very hard for them to understand what does that mean. They say, how can you say I lose? Look at all these concessions I got. I must be winning. When labor wins, management loses, shareholder loses, then they have the incentive to move their operations to somewhere else where there is no union. So when labor and management fight, there are two losers. There are two losers to every conflict. So it is very important to understand this because much of our institutions are actually based on contesting an idea or going at each other, seeing who wins and who loses. Our presidential elections are modeled after this. Somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. Our legal system is modeled after this. There is a defense, there is a prosecutor. One wins, the other loses. So the whole notion is actually dangerous because we are missing a lot of opportunities. We are missing the opportunity of designing institutions that actually work for win-win. It is possible. It's not a daydream because, as I showed you from the model of the business system, in fact, it's quite prevalent. Every time you buy something, it's win-win.
It seems that we let the consequences or the absence of consequences get in the way of seeing that win-win.
Most of us don't know what are our enlightened self-interest, what is good for us. And if you ask people, I explained earlier on about having a winning attitude means you don't know how to define your objectives. This is the reason, because if people don't know what is their objective, how can they know what is a win? For example, take a labor management conflict. What is a win for labor? What is it you want? Do you want higher pay or do you want job security? You get the higher pay, you could lose your job security. There is a trade-off. Sometimes people don't see that there are natural trade-offs for what they're looking for. Systems thinking is telling us that the ultimate goal of the society is to achieve sustained prosperity.
Going back to the business model, if we could, because as a business coach, obviously this is really one of the key parts of the book that I really enjoyed, because I think it does help us understand as we're running a business, whether it's an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, if you will, one-person operation, or a global multinational.
That's right.
It seems to me that most everything can be explained here.
That's right.
I think the hardest part, though, I think most people can see that, yes, I do business with these other companies and I have these customers. How does this help us, though? You know, many times the conflict is, how do I navigate my own company? How do I navigate my own organization? So I think this might shed some light on that as well.
Well, it does, because what it's telling you is that between the suppliers, your business, and your customers, you are each adding value. So you're all links in an industry value chain. Every one of you is choosing to do part of the industry value chain. And the part that is most appropriate for your business to do is the one that capitalizes on your core competencies. So you can add the most value at the lowest opportunity cost. This is called, in economics, we call this comparative advantage. And comparative advantage, again, is a concept that people have a hard time getting their minds around. It means you have choices. You could produce product A, you can produce product B. You have certain amount of resources, you have certain amount of production capacity. There is a production possibilities frontier based on your resources. The more of one product you make, they can make the less of the other product. And therefore, you want to make the product that gives you the highest return on your investment.
And so these suppliers and customers, if you're I don't know, let's say you're in manufacturing. Your suppliers internally could be salespeople. And your customers, maybe you manufacture a piece to an assembly that somebody else, some other company makes.
That's right. So
or somebody else in the company, within the company makes. So it's suppliers and customers can be people, can be other business units within the same company.
No,
the thought process
we are crossing the boundaries of the business unit. So in some conglomerates, it may be part of a larger conglomerate. Maybe these two are part of a conglomerate. But generally, your suppliers are producing value. The industry value chain starts from natural resources, mines, and ends up in a dump. Anywhere between mining, refining, intermediate products, shaping, making commodities, to value added, to extra value added, to the supply chain, all the way to the final consumption and the landfill is all industry value chain. Each economic entity has the incentive to do the part of the industry value chain that brings them the most value, which means you are matching your core competency with the needs of the market. This is one of the magics of free market system, how it can create wealth.
As we look at the business model, at each one of these steps, it obviously requires a brand of leadership to understand the inputs and outputs of wherever it is you fit in the world.
This is the topic of a strategy. A strategy tells you how you're going to shape your value chain activities. Are you going to divest some? Are you going to outsource some of value chain activities? Are you going to get into the value chain activities of your suppliers or in your value chain activities of your customers?
So one of the things that, I almost had to chuckle to myself when I read it, is, very much agree with the concept of leadership, but you throw salesmanship in there.
Yes.
As leadership, and very few times do I ever hear sales and leadership, equated to each other. Maybe if you could explain or expand on that a little bit, what you mean by that.
Consider the skills we expect from our leaders. We expect our leaders to have communication skills. We expect our leaders to manage feelings and persuade. We expect leaders to build relationships. We expect leaders to be rational thinkers and be emotionally centered. We expect leaders to learn about managing groups. We expect leaders to know how to bring teams to learn. Which one is different from salesmanship?
No, I would agree that successful sales include those same skills.
That's right. The same way as leadership is not something you do to others, but you do something for others. Successful salespeople also follow the same model. The best salespeople don't sell. They facilitate the buyer to buy. And when you facilitate the buyer to buy, the buyer buys, and when the buyer buys, then selling has happened.
And so it even ties back to that value chain, and
that's right. Or you're adding value. That's right. That's exactly right.
Because if you're selling to, it seems as though
you're doing something to them,
right,
rather than doing something for them.
But if they buy based on a value proposition, you're doing for.
That's right.
And you don't get the argument back that I was ripped off.
You get exact opposite. You get friends.
You never have enough friends.
That's right. I had customers who actually sent me Christmas cards long after I left that job. Why? Because they accepted me as a friend. Because they realized that I have their best interest at heart. I'm not taking advantage of them. I'm not acting opportunistically. When you see someone is not acting opportunistically, you trust them.
And so from this idea of love and learning at an individual level, how does that help you combat, but you have sales quota that you have, or you have things that you have to do, if you put it in the leadership context? How does this help us decide how to stay on that better high road, so to speak?
The decisions that you make affect systems. Systems can be either deterministic or probabilistic. And the decision that you make can be either routine or non-routine. So routine decisions about deterministic system are the easiest. But sometimes you're making non-routine decisions, and you're making about probabilistic systems. These are the most difficult. Decisions that are routine and deterministic actually can be automated. You go to a teller machine, you put your card. If you got money, you get the money out. If you don't have money in there, you don't get it. But salespeople are making decisions, are managing systems that are probabilistic, which means you can call on 100 customers and get nowhere. Or you may call on 10 customers and get a big order. There is no correlation. Yes, the more is a people say it's a numbers game. Yes, the better you do, the more professional you are, you can reduce the number of calls and increase your chances of success. So giving salespeople quotas is actually mismanaging the process, because you're getting them to potentially do the wrong thing. Because the system they are managing is a probabilistic system. Let me give you an example,
Okay.
a real life example. I used to be in sales. And one day the boss calls a meeting of all the salespeople and tells us all that the head office in Switzerland has decided that we should double the sales.
Just like that.
Just like that. I asked him why. He said, what do you mean by why? I just told you, head office has decided we should double the sales. I said, but why? He said, which part you don't understand? I told him the part that the head office did not say go double the profit. They asked double the revenue. Do you know what it takes to double the revenue? It means you have to buy double the factors of production. It means you have to sell double in the market. It means you have to produce double. Can you produce double? You are already late on every blessed shipment as it is, and you want to double output, you want to double the sales. Now, if the head office has said go double the profit, it's very easy to do. All you have to do is stop managers, fly first class, and you instantly double your profits.
Funny how that works.
So when people say go sell more, you have to say, there is a market out there. Maybe the market doesn't want your quota. Maybe the market wants more. Are you ready? Do you have enough capacity to produce what the market needs? So systems thinking brings you to set your goals in relationship, in alignment with your operating capacity, not just in an arbitrary number. Maybe there is a recession. Maybe people don't want to buy right now. Maybe people want to buy a lot. So your number is really arbitrary. You have to look at what the market wants.
And you have to look at it holistically.
That is what holistic means. Why is the business there? Is the business there to make revenue, or is the business there to make profit? Because business as a system, their input is the investment and the output is profit. All these other activities down here, buying factors of production, producing products, sales and marketing, all of these is just a process by which the business system converts its input of investment into the output of profit. The profit should be the goal, not revenues, not more sales.
Well, and having some personal experience with that, any attempts to have salespeople paid on profit usually meets with a lot of resistance, as I'm sure you've seen.
Well, it depends what level of investment they need to make in selling the product. For example, the selling that I did, they needed to make a lot of investment in me because I was selling capital equipment. I was selling brand new technology. They trained me for a year in Switzerland so I could do that. And I had to make investment. So you couldn't just put those kind of people on commission alone. You have to give them a good base salary because they need to make a big investment in order to sell the product.
So the last question I have is, you brought it up earlier about learning. Obviously, this system is fluid.
That's right.
Globally, internationally,
People have
domestically,
choices.
as long as there's people involved, it'll be fluid.
That's right.
So people have to learn, and as I've, one of my favorite quotes from Alvin Toffler was, the illiterate of the 21st century is not those that can not read and write. They're the ones that can't learn, unlearn, and relearn.
That's right. That's exactly
So how does this systems idea help us with that concept? And in the context of his quote, How does that help us unlearn and relearn? Because I know learning was a key part of your the book itself.
Most people have problem learning because they have problem unlearning. Learning means changing behavior, which means it means unlearning. The reason people have problem unlearning is because what they learned before, they acquire through painful experiences. And they don't want to let go of what they acquired with painful experiences in favor of something new.
Is that because it might be painful to relearn?
That's right. You see, we educated people are easily manipulated. We think we are good learners. But what it means is that we really have no commitment to any idea.
True enough.
We can be persuaded to abandon one idea in favor of another. But people who have learned through the school of hard knocks and through experience, they get attached to whatever learning they absorb through pain. My dad used to say, when people say experience is good, what they really mean is painful experience is good. It is the painful experience that gets you to change behavior, to reassess what you believe. Without that pain, people don't naturally go around and change their behavior. It's the pain that gets them stop going in this direction and move in a different direction.
So do you think that the systems approach or a systems ideology or attitude, if you will, could make the relearning process or the unlearning and relearning process less painful?
Systems thinking tells you that learning comes from doing, not from reading, but from doing. You could read, 10 books about flying a plane. Doesn't mean you can fly. You have to get in the simulator and do it and see exactly how it performs before you learn. Learning comes from doing. The implication of this is that every action is an opportunity to learn. And what in systems thinking is highlighting is that you take an action in pursuit of some defined benefit, but what you can learn from that action is actually much more valuable than the benefit you intended. Even if you do not get the intended benefit, what you learn from that experience can inform all your future decisions. So every action, we should learn from it. We should never make old mistakes. We should only make new mistakes.
I couldn't agree more. How does this help people to get past the, okay, made the mistake, fix the mistake, I'm done, and we move on? The learning doesn't necessarily always happen.
That's right. This is a diagram about personal growth. If you love yourself and others, you're willing to learn. When you learn self-management. When you learn self-management, you develop integrity. Then you can acquire knowledge and skills. Then you can influence action. Now you acquire experiences. Through experiences, you make choices that really amount to self-creation. And when you create yourself, then you develop self-worth, and that leads to more love for yourself and others. And that leads to more learning and so forth. So learning is not just a pragmatic step getting you from input to the results. Learning drives the whole wheel, the whole cycle of personal growth. There is no progress without learning.
Absolutely. The key, I believe, is in what we want, I think, in a more practical world is, do we take that learning on ourselves, or are we forced into it? The pain, if you will, from your previous comments.
That's right. Is it internalized or not?
Yes, exactly right. Well, this has been very informative. I certainly enjoyed the book. Can you sum up kind of like if you took away one thing from reading this book, what would it be? It's
about the individual's intrinsic human worth. that every blessed member of the human family has the capacity to love and the capacity to learn. And it is really these two capacities that drive us to create all the wealth around us. By the virtue of these two capacities, the capacity to love and the capacity to learn, we humans can create so much wealth far beyond what we need for survival, far beyond what we need to satisfy our wildest fantasies. So we are really precious. All humans are precious. And to the extent we can lead them for a productive life through learning and through self-creation and through creating self-worth, we enhance the prosperity of everyone. We guide people towards sustained prosperity.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks so much, Hank.
Thank you.
All right.
Great questions.
The only thing constant in our world is change. Whether we embrace it or it embraces us, we have choices to make every day. Objectivity means seeing things as they are, rather than as we wish or fear them to be. Being equipped with tools and knowledge to sustain us is critical. Adapting to the big picture and its complexities can be exciting and fun. What you have seen here are powerful tools to apply to your situation. We welcome your inquiries into ways we can help you make a difference in your world starting today.